faces go away?
That I think, let me see what I can do.
I mean, people can do it individually if they, like the menu at the top to reduce the size.
Yeah, I think if people go into full screen, I'll have to look into that. Because the trouble is I've got two screens and I can see the full screen. So I'm not quite sure what to do. I think the best thing is if people will go on to turn off their videos, that might help.
Or like I said, there is a menu there, and if they just click the reduce button to make it small.
Okay. So if people want to do that.
Okay, I'm going to start while they're doing that. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak this evening. It's a little strange to sitting here talking to my computer, but I know you're out there. So without further ado, let's get started. So why would we even try to push the zone limits? Well, gardeners all like to grow the unusual. We like the challenge of something new and different. Plus, you know, someone saying that won't grow here, well, that basically laying down a challenge to see if we can make it grow here. We have a bit of a competitive nature. Most gardeners are always happy to announce when they've got the first ripe tomato or, you know, that first bloom of the spring. So we like to share our successes with other gardeners. And of course, by pushing the zone limit, we can introduce more possibilities for growing in our garden. And the photo I've got here is Sinaloesis palmata. Kiko is the cultivar. And common name would be shredded umbrella plant. There is a more plain version of this, but this Kiko has this beautiful veination, more prominent in early spring, and I seem to see it again now, so it's probably driven by cold weather. The leaf on the far left with the fading veins is probably more indicative of what you might see in the heat of summer. But it is only hardy to zone 6, yet I grow it successfully in my garden here. I'm along the St. Lawrence. I'm in zone 5B, which I imagine a lot of urban gardens in Ottawa probably could be a 5B with a bit of a microclimate, but we'll get into that a bit more in a minute. Well, how would we even push the zone limit? As I mentioned, there are microclimates in our gardens. And by microclimate, I mean an area that is artificially warmer than the rest of the garden. So if we look at on a big scale, a big hillside, you've got the sunny side of the hill, so you're going to be warmer along there. The prominent winds probably are going down the cold other side. So that side of the hill would be warmer than the other side. Well, in our own gardens, we have structures like buildings and walls that reflect heat. We also have windscreens, trees, hedges, and all of these things can contribute to a microclimate. So you could have a southwestern exposure, and that area could be well sheltered and warmer in the summer. And if everything aligns properly, it would also get, you know, drifting snow in the winter and protect the plant roots. So, you know, that would be considered a microclimate. And of course, zone limits are really based on the hybridizer's trials. So when you're looking at a plant tag and it says USDA hardiness zone 4, like this one here for the Haconicloa macra aureola, or Japanese forest grass, it says USDA zone 4, and that's because that's how far they've tested it. So that would be a zone 5 in Canada. It doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't hardy to a zone lower than that, but you know, that's how far they've tested it, and that's how far it's been successful. So sometimes they have tested it further and it hasn't been successful, but in other cases, it's just that's how far they trialed it, and that's how far, you know, they're willing to say that it's hardy to. Another way we can push the zone limit is growing things from seed. If you've ever heard Crystal Wallach of Gardens North, she's retired now. If you've ever heard Crystal speak, she will expound the virtues of growing from seed. She always says the vigor of seed is amazing. And what she means by that is a plant that is grown from seed in the resident soil, never gets transplanted, doesn't have to live in artificial nursery pot soil and on quote unquote steroids of chemical fertilizers. It just grows where it's supposed to and continues growing. It will have a better chance of establishing quickly, having a good root system, and adjusting to the environment more quickly. Reliable snow cover, whoops, that was the bigger seed picture, sorry. Reliable snow cover. We've all seen how snow can either just blow off your property, or you can catch it by leaving some plant stubble in your garden, having a hedge along an area where you want a good snow cover. So even if you don't naturally have the snow collecting in your yard, sometimes we can help it along, but as I said, just leaving the perennials until the spring to clean up. That also helps the bugs, of course, but it will catch that snow and help insulate your plants. And we can protect trees and shrubs and other plants. There's all kinds of things we can do. We can put rose cones on, we can wrap them. But really, is that what you want to look at all winter? I really don't recommend this. It's not a look for the garden that I particularly ascribe to. So let's see if we can avoid doing that by getting the plants off to a good start without needing the extra protection every year. Maybe the first year, but not every year. And of course, I like to say it's denial on my part, because I will look at different resources and different catalogs. And if 3 of them say it's only hardy to zone 7, but I find one that says it's hardy to zone 6, I will give it a try. Because to me, a zone 6 plant is worth trying. Because I'm in a 5B and I have a little microclimate along my southwest wall. But, and sometimes it's misinformation. Like I said, you can look at 4 or 5 different sites and get different information from each one. And sometimes you'll buy a plant saying, oh, it's perfectly hardy, and then do your research later and find out everyone else says it isn't. But don't tell the plant, because sometimes they're growing and happy and thriving. So luckily, plants can't read their own labels. And of course, there's climate change happening. We know that our tulips are blooming sooner some years, and we're getting our first frosts later in the year. I haven't had a hard frost yet here. I don't know how Ottawa's doing. But this is climate change. We know it's not a good thing, but as gardeners, we're kind of going, oh good, now I can grow things I couldn't grow before. So let's look at some plants, and what I've put together for a list of plants are things that I grow in my garden, and I'm including things that are hardy to our zone, but for some reason people just don't think they are. And I base this on a Master Gardener of Ottawa Carleton Facebook group that we have, because we've had quite a few discussions this summer about different plants, some of which I'll show you. And some will say, well, can I grow this? And other people say, no, it's not hardy here. And then a bunch of people will pipe up and say, oh yeah, it is. So that's some of the plants we're going to look at. And we're also going to look at plants that are outside their zone limit, but that I've grown them successfully, and either in my former Ottawa garden, or that I know others are growing and they've shared pictures with me. So I'm just going through alphabetically some different plants that I grow in my garden. So Acanthus hungaricus, or bear's breeches is the common name. It's a perennial. It's 36 to 40 inches tall. And the consensus on the different resources I could find was said it was hardy to zone 6. Now I know Suzanne Patry sells this at her garden center, and I know other Ottawa gardeners that grow it. So don't think that you can't grow it. It is hardy, and it needs full sun to part shade. And in fact, it's quite happy in my garden. It self-seeds quite readily. And one of the reasons it self-seeds is because even after those flowers are past their prime, they're forming seed, but they still look like the flowers. There's a big seed pod inside, and that's developing, but the flowers just look like a paler version of what you see there. So they're still quite ornamental. So I leave them up, and next thing I know, they've seeded all over. There are some other varieties of acanthus. This Hungaricus is the hardiest. There's also Acanthus mollis and Acanthus spinosa. Now, I've seen people sell mollis in our area, and in fact, I bought one that was labeled Acanthus hungaricus and one that was labeled Acanthus mollis, and they both survived. So, and then I did some reading on it, and it said that quite often they're mislabeled. So maybe I got two Acanthus hungaricus. I'm not sure, because Acanthus mollis is supposed to be more tender than this one. And of course, the Japanese maples. And I'm not just looking at the Japanese. Let's look at Acer. So that's the maple, Japonicum, Acer palmatum, and Acer pseudosubaldianum. And that is actually the Korean maple. And that's what you see in the picture here. And the color is that beautiful in the fall. It's green through the summer, but in the fall, it's this glorious orange yellow. And of course, they are trees, and they come in a variety of sizes. You can get dwarfs, so anywhere from 3 feet as a dwarf to 30 feet. And there are mature specimens growing in Ottawa, so don't feel they won't grow in Ottawa. And again, there are some that are hardier than others, so check the zones, but you know, generally zone 5 to 6. They like part shade. Their biggest problem is sun scorch. And the only thing that I would say in the winter, it's not the cold that's going to get them. It's probably the deer or the voles and mice that nibbling on the bark. The deer will eat off the buds and prune your tree severely. And of course, voles will girdle the tree. So give them some protection in the winter from animals. But other than that, they're quite hardy. Hardier ones would include bloodgood. Is probably the hardiest. There are some other, a good cutleaf one is Inaba shaderi. Agapanthus. I've got 2 varieties. This is Blue Globe. Common name is Lily of the Nile, and it's a bulb. This tiny blue one only gets to about 12 to 15 inches tall, hardy to zone 6. Likes full sun, and good drainage is essential on this one. I grew this in Ottawa in my rural garden, Carlsbad Springs, which is basically gardening in a sandbox. It was pure red beach sand. So, whoops, we had excellent drainage there. So this plant had no problem surviving there. When I moved here, I brought a piece with me, and it did not survive the first winter. But of course, I don't give up that easily. So I tried again. This time, sorry, my finger's hovering too close to the tracker pad. This time when I planted it, I made sure I removed all that nursery soil. Nursery soil, as you know, the bag soil is very peat-based. So when you want excellent drainage, you don't want something like peat that's going to hold moisture around those bulbs. So I removed all of that. Added a bit of organic matter to the soil to improve the drainage, and then put the bulbs in, and then they survive for the winter. So I do recommend removing the nursery soil from all your plants, not just, in this case, something that needs good drainage. I found it's made a world of difference not having that peat-based soil in under the plant, because peat does 2 things. This time of year, it's going to hold a lot of moisture going into winter, which can cause things to rot. But in the dead of summer, once, as you know, when peat dries out, it becomes hydrophobic, so it repels water. It's very hard to rehydrate. So imagine under your plant, now you've got this dried out mass of peaty soil that isn't rehydrating. You're basically causing your plant to die of dehydration. And it can be raining outside. In fact, that's how I discovered this. One year when we had a very good wet summer, and some of my plants still weren't thriving, and I, dug some up to see what's going on, and that peat around those roots was bone dry despite the very wet year. But I digress. Back to the agapanthus. I also grow a white variety, and this one's taller than the than the blue variety. This one's about 20 to 24 inches tall. Again, hardy to zone 6. This one took off right away in my garden. So, you know, I didn't have to repurchase it. It just seems to have thrived. It's increasing in size. I've had it 4 or 5 years now. So, as I said, though, good drainage is essential. Alstroemeria, Sweet Laura, and this is a hardier variety of Alstroemeria. I've tried some of the Inca series. Some have, you know, overwintered a couple winters and then are gone. So we might call that a short-lived perennial, but I like my perennials to last a little longer than that. But Sweet Laura just thrives. Lily of the Incas, it would be its common name. It's also a bulb, and it likes to grow quite deep. I'd say it's down 6 or 8 inches. So if you do ever divide that, you really got to dig deep. It's about 24 to 30 inches tall, hardy to zone 6, but again, I grew this in Carlsbad Springs. I've grown it here. It spreads quite nicely, and it actually is still throwing some blooms. Not the big massive bloom of early in the season, but it's still throwing some blooms. So full sun, rich soil, and good drainage again. Asimina triloba, or the pawpaw tree. Pawpaw fruit are very delicate. They don't travel well, so it's not something you would see on the regular market, but you can grow them here. Make It Green sells them at their nursery. It is a tree, a small tree, 15 to 20 feet tall, hardy to zone 6. As I said, though, Make It Green sells them, and they would be a zone 5 in Ottawa. And will take full sun to part shade, and of course the fruits are edible, and the flowers aren't bad either. Begonia grandis, a hardy begonia. Again, only about 12 inches tall given the length of season here. In more tropical climates, it would probably get a lot bigger, but it does come back every year and bloom. This is the pink form you see in the picture. I also have a white version of this. Not spectacular flowers, but it's just nice to be able to say I've got a hardy begonia growing in the garden. And it likes full sun to part shade. Butterfly bush, or Buddleia davidii. And I've also got here on the screen, if I can remember how I can't remember how it works. Anyways, I'll just use the cursor as my pointer. This is Buddleia weriana, yes. And they're perennial. Now, be very patient with these guys in the spring. I've known people that have said they're dead. They dug them out. There was no growth. All the branches were dead. Well, the branches above the soil will be dead. They shoot up from the base again. So be very patient in the spring and watch for those grayish glaucous, a little bit hairy type leaves coming off the base, and hopefully your plant will come back for you. They do come in various heights. So anywhere from the dwarf versions that have been out recently to the full 6 feet high. And if we had a longer season in a really sheltered area, they could get even taller. My sister had one growing near Kempville, and she had a southwest corner, and the Buddleia was right in that corner. And I swear one year it was 12 to 15 feet tall and just covered in mauve blooms. So pick a site with full sun. And as I said, be patient in the spring because it will die back to the ground. And up in the pictures here, I've got Dark Night. Did I write these down? No, I didn't. This is the weriana, the yellow form. And then this one is a variegated form. I think it's Buddleia davidii tricolor. So you can see the foliage is that variegated foliage behind, and then the flower itself is that reddish purple. Calicarpa, and this is a hybridized cultivar here called Pearl Glam, and that's the one I grow in my garden. Its common name is beautyberry, and this is a shrub, and it probably won't get the height that you see here, because it does die down to the ground and has to grow back every year, but it does grow back every year. It does have flowers that are very insignificant, very tiny flowers, but they are followed by these beautiful amethyst colored berries. And it will be late in the season, but be patient. The first year, you might not see much of it, but following years, as the plant matures and establishes itself, you should see the flower and the seed berries form earlier and earlier each year. So hardy to zone 5, likes full sun and good drainage. Ceratostigma plumbaginoides. This is the hardy blue-flowered leadwort or false plumbago. It's just a creeping ground cover, and it's only 6 to 8 inches tall, a little perennial, hardy to zone 5. And again, there are people who will say they can't get it to grow, and others just say it just thrives for them. I had a big patch of it at my Carlsbad Springs garden. I brought a piece here, it promptly died. I tried again in the same spot, it promptly died. I tried again, and this time I realized what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I realized I should try a different spot, which I did, and now it's thriving. So, you know, plants will pick and choose where they want to live. So, like I said, full sun, good drainage. Crocosmia, often mispronounced as crocosmia, but crocosmia, also known as Montbretia. It's a corm, so a form like a bulb, but a corm. And it gets quite tall and forms a big clump if it's happy. So 30 to 36 inches tall, hardy to zone 5. Now there are different varieties. Some of the yellows and oranges I find not as hardy. If you're looking for the hardiest one, I would say that would be Lucifer. But again, good drainage and full sun are so important for these Montbretia. I would do what I said with the agapanthus, which is remove any nursery soil, make sure the bulb has good drainage. If your soil is heavy, make sure you add some compost to add some air pockets in it so that you get better drainage. Cyclamen hederifolium, the ivy leaf cyclamen. This is not the supermarket variety. This is a hardy form. And again, it's a bulb or corm, and it's tiny and it's very late in the season. It generally starts blooming in October, early November. So you want to site it or locate it somewhere near a pathway that you would walk by at that time of year, because obviously we're not spending as much time in our garden then, but if you can find a spot where it will be visible, then it certainly is pleasant to see blooms at that time of year. And the interesting thing, at least this is what it always did for me, was it would start blooming, like I said, in November, and then, you know, the snow would come, and then snow would go, and there it would be, still the leaves still looking good, and then some new blooms would pop up in early spring. And then it would probably go dormant over the summer. So you absolutely need to protect this one from squirrels. They're not an inexpensive little corm, so you don't want to buy expensive squirrel feed. What I do is, if I have a bulb like this, I will plant the bulb, cover it with some soil, put some hardware cloth over it. And that's a very fine wire mesh. It's not as big a weave as chicken wire. It's quite tiny, and that will protect it so the squirrels can't reach in and grab that corm, but you know, the leaves will be able to emerge through it. And then just put a bit more soil on top of the mesh so that you don't have to look at it, or put your mulch down on top of that, and that will stop the squirrels from stealing them. Dracunculus vulgaris. An arum. It's in the same family as our native Jack in the Pulpit, but this one's a little more tropical. And I was surprised when I looked this one up and it said it was hardy to zone 7, because I know I grew this one in Carlsbad Springs. So, I mean, I think having that good drainage in Carlsbad really helped. And the area where I had it growing did get a lot of leaf cover in the fall. I was growing under a maple grove, so obviously there's a lot of leaves that fell. But this is quite a showstopper in the garden when it's in bloom. Well, people will, walk along, see it, stop to admire it, get a whiff of it, and keep walking. It's one of these plants that is pollinated by flies, so it stinks like rotting flesh. It only stinks the first day it opens, but it is quite pungent. In fact, the first time it bloomed in my garden, I was accusing my dog of dragging some roadkill into the garden, but I figured out what it was eventually when I noticed the flies buzzing around the spadix. And yeah, so it's a beauty. And as you can see, this is the one in my current garden, and it started from a single bulb, and this year I think it had 5 or 6 flowers on it. So it has increased in size. The unfortunate thing about it, it is a favorite of the Japanese beetles, but it still does its thing. The Fagus sylvatica purpurea tricolor, or tricolor beech. This is like 1,000 blossoms on a tree in the spring, but it's not blossoms, it's the foliage. It's the smaller insert picture here is the actual color. It's brilliant. It just draws you in to see it. It's a tree, of course. It gets about 30 feet tall. Hardy to zone 6. I know Rita Woodland Ramble, Rob and Dave have one growing in their yard. Mine's been fine here. I think we both had some dieback in 2016 when we had a really hard winter, but overall it does quite well. Likes full sun. And I mean, it's a tree. It's a specimen tree that will look good in most mid-sized gardens. Might be too big for a small garden though. Hardy fuchsia, Fuchsia magellanica. Oops, sorry. Keep my fingers away. This is a deciduous shrub if it were growing in its normal conditions. For me, it gets killed back to the ground every year, but it comes back, gets to about 12 inches tall, and does have blooms. And the variety I have is Aurea, I believe that's what it's called. So a golden form. So it's like the one you see in the picture. Again, it's the research. I thought it was hardy to zone 6, but this says zone 7. So obviously I found a catalog that, gave me the misinformation I wanted to give it a try. And like I said, it does die back to the ground. If it were growing in a proper zone 7 or above, it probably would be a full-size shrub. The hardy hibiscus, Hibiscus moschutus, the perennial big dinner plate flowers. Everyone loves these. In fact, I have one still blooming away in my garden. It's been putting on bloom since beginning of August, I think. They get to about 40 to 60 inches tall, hardy to zone 5, full sun, good drainage. It will self-seed in your garden, or you can collect those seed. And again, this is one you have to be patient with in the spring. It dies back to the ground. You'll think it's dead, but just be patient because you'll see these little shoots coming out from the base, and it will be back for next year. But give it good drainage. Again, this is one I definitely would want to remove all that peat-based soil and give it the best chance possible. Hibiscus syriacus, or the Rose of Sharon, another shrub. And again, there's dwarf varieties, there's taller varieties, so I'm saying anywhere from 4 to 8 feet tall. hardy to zone 6, likes full sun. And I grew one in Carlsbad Springs. I started with a very small plant, like it was a maybe a 8-inch plant seedling when I got it. And I think that really helps, starting with small plants. They get a chance to establish better and acclimatize. They get good snow cover those first few years when they're that small. And then once they're established and have a good root system, they have more resilience to get through a winter. So this is one too that I found takes a while to mature and bloom on schedule. The first year my one in Carlsbad bloomed, I think it was in September, it had one bloom. Then the next year I had more blooms a little earlier, and then eventually it was blooming in July like it should be. Another tree, Heptacodium myconioides, or seven suns tree. This is blooming in my garden right now, so it's a great one for some fall blooms. These little white blooms are followed by red sepals. Those little white things eventually turn red, and then it still looks like it's in bloom, but it's gone from white to red. It also has this beautiful exfoliating bark, so it's got multiple seasons of interest. I know a lot of people who grow it in Ottawa successfully, so it's definitely worth a try. A little hard to source, but there are garden centers that carry it or will order it in for you. And it's a small tree, a 15 to 20 foot tree, but definitely worth growing, as I said, for the multiple seasons of interest. Ipomopsis rubra. This is a common name is standing cypress, although I've never heard it called that. It's a biennial, so you need to seed it 1 year. It will form little rosettes, very small. I mean, we're talking under 4 inches in diameter, little rosettes of foliage on the ground. And then they will shoot up the following year into these tall, slender plants with the flowers along the stem. 2 to 5 feet tall. I would say, given our climate, 2 to 3 feet is you're probably going to be a maximum. Obviously, in warmer climate, they would get taller, but needs full sun and good drainage. I had some in my general garden area where it's heavily mulched, and they didn't make it through the winter. And I have some now here in what I call my scree bed that has a lot of sand mixed in the soil. There's a lot of pea gravel as the mulch and mixed in the soil also. So the drainage is excellent there. So hopefully I will have better success here. Another tree, the Metasequoia glyptostroboides, and this form is gold rush, so the gold leaf form. And it's called the golden dawn redwood, so you know it's going to be a big tree. It's a deciduous conifer, drops its needles. They're still on the tree now. So you need a lot of space for this one, but it's such an interesting tree to have in the garden. The foliage is delicate. It's one of those, plants that you walk by and you have to stroke when you see it. It's not at all like a needle conifer type tree. It's very soft. Hardy to zone 5, so should not be a problem in Ottawa, and it likes full sun. The Liriodendron tulipifera, or the tulip tree, another tree, but this one's a tall one, 16 to 90 feet. The leaves themselves, which you can see on the little inset picture, are tulip shaped, and the flowers are tulip shaped. Hence the name tulip tree. Again, hardy to zone 5. I actually got this at a nursery in Russell, so, and again, available in Ottawa. There's an excellent specimen of it at the experimental farm also. And it likes full sun and good drainage. So a good ornamental tree. The magnolia, there's a lot of species of magnolia that are hardy to our area. So it's definitely worth trying. I've got a few here. I've got, this is Lubnarii, Magnolia Lubnarii, and the variety I've got is Leonard Messel. Then we've got the saucer magnolia, Magnolia Soulangeana. the star magnolia, Magnolia stellata, and Magnolia seboldii, one of the Wilsonii group. And of course, they're all under the general name Magnolia, and they come, as I said, as a shrub or tree. So you can have some that are only 8 feet, anywhere up to 50 feet tall as for a full-size tree. And because of so many different varieties, they start at zone 5. Stellata is probably the hardiest of the bunch. Although I have seen a lot of the saucer magnolias and Leonard Messel growing in Ottawa. They like full sun to part shade, and they need good drainage. And again, I was speaking with Crystal Wallach, formerly of Gardens North, retired from Gardens North, and asked her thoughts on some of the different pushing the hardiness zone plants. And she said anything in the magnolias is worth trying, because once you've got something in a genus that is hardy, sometimes it's worth trying some of the other species in that. So she suggested Magnolia tripetala, acuminata, officinalis, biloba, brazeri, and macrophylla. Excuse me, I just need to get a drink. And Monardella macrantha. Now this is an interesting little plant, and I happened upon it at Richie's here in Brockville. So sometimes you've just got to have your eyes open when you go to the garden centers. You'll find unusual things. It's called, common name is red Monardella. It's native to the mountainous regions of California, so not exactly hardy here, except it is hardy to zone 6. It likes full sun and needs good drainage. It's just a short little thing. So I put it in my scree bed or alpine garden bed, and so far it's done okay. So I'm hopeful that it will continue to thrive. It's been through one winter already. And there are hardy cactus that are hardy to Ontario. This is Eastern prickly pear cactus. There used to be a colony of these. Well, there used to be more than one, but the last colony has been depleted, lost due to development. And it is a perennial. It looks pretty ratty in the spring, but it plumps back up and flowers prolifically, puts on new growth, 8 to 10 inches tall, hardy to zone 5, loves full sun, of course, as a cactus. Absolutely needs good drainage. So again, I've got it in my scree bed, good mix of sand and grit. And there are other cactus that are hardy to our area. Opuntia fragilis, it's just a variation of the color. Opuntia polycantha, nice rosy color. And Echinoceras, this one's called the hedgehog cactus. All of these are hardy to our area, which again, referring back to Crystal's Gardens North, when she was in North Gower, she had a huge bed of these, and it was quite a sight to see all of them in bloom. The ornamental oregano, Oreganum rotundifolia, Kent Beauty. Another perennial, hardy to zone 6, but again, I grew this in Ottawa with no problem. Very good drainage is essential. It's a perennial, has that lovely oregano scent, but these dainty little flowers that the bees love. And it's a low grower, so if you can, have it somewhere in a raised bed or dropping over a wall like you see here, you get a better view of it then. Now, a couple plants that I don't grow, but Paul Bolt of Gatineau was kind enough to share this information. He posted these on the Master Gardener Facebook group, and I asked if I could share this picture in this presentation, and he said, of course. So he has this purple passion flower, Passiflora incarnata, or Maymop. It's a perennial vine. There it is in bloom. And it doesn't get really tall, of course, because it dies back to the ground. My research said it was hardy to zone 7. He's growing it in Gatineau, which, I mean, if he's in the lower valley of the Gatineau River, we all know how quickly they get frosts in the fall, but perhaps he's in a more sheltered area. And as I said, it does die back to the ground. I believe he adds some extra leaves over it, but it's just an example of, you know, you've got to try it. You don't know what's hardy here until you try it. Another one that Paul shared with me is his bamboo, dragonhead bamboo, Fargesia rufa. And we'll call it a shrub. It's not a runner. This is a clump former. It gets 2 to 4 feet tall, hardy to zone 6, likes part shade. And you can see the contrast. He's got it growing beside the pedicites there. The big leaf is the pedicites. And of course, the fine leaf is the bamboo. So quite a lovely contrast. And again, sometimes you just got to try these things. I did grow a dwarf bamboo in Carlsbad Springs. And I remember when I got it at Gardens North, and I asked, but you sure it's not in one of these spreaders, is it? And was given the answer, oh, no, Eddie said, no, of course not in our climate. And sure enough, it was spreading everywhere. So just be cautious on what you buy. Now, I wanted to include a bit of information. I know the title of the talk is Pushing the Zone Limit, but let's look at how we can cheat the zone limit. This is my hardy fig, or Ficus carica. About 5-6 years ago, the PC stores were offering these. Anything in the Loblaws chain, PC, had these hardy figs for $20 a pot. And I looked at them and said, yeah, right, I don't believe it. Well, the summer was starting to wind down, and one day my neighbors stopped in and said, we're at the superstore, and they had these hardy figs on sale for $2. And they had bought a few. I think they bought 4 or 5. And I said, well, I wasn't willing to spend the $20, but I'll spend the $2 if they're still there when I go there. So sure enough, they were. So I got myself one. I still did not trust it to be hardy in our area, because everything I knew about figs, they had to be buried in the soil and insulated and would die back. So I put mine in a pot, which you can see here, and leave it on my deck in the summer. And sure enough, it forms figs, and by end of August, they're ripening, and I get 3 or 4 figs a day from this, you know, for about 2 or 3 weeks. So it's wonderful. And that's, it is a small tree. So it's supposed to get 9 to 12 feet tall. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it when it gets that tall. I say hardy to zone 5. Well, that's what the label says, but I will tell you that the neighbors that stopped and told me they'd picked up a few of them, they put some in the ground and left them there. And yes, it did come back the next year, but because it died back to the ground, it had to put on all that growth. And then by August, when it started to form figs, it was too late in the season for them to ripen. So yes, it will survive, but no, you won't get fruit. So I think the pot is the best way to go for this one if you do want to try it. It's a novelty, and it's just a fun thing to grow, and the figs are delicious. So full sun, well drained but moist. Of course, it's in a pot, so it's well drained. That's why the watering can's there, because I do give it a bit of water every day. And in the winter, it goes into my cold storage. There it is, asleep for the winter. Now, when I had my house built, I did specifically have a cold storage room put in. And what it is, it's under the front porch. And as you know, when foundations are poured, they pour the porches, but they usually backfill them with sand and then put the cement on top. Well, I told them, no, leave it as a room with a door to the basement of the house inside, and of course put the cement slab on top. So it's an unheated space. It does have vents to the outside, and I've keep a thermometer in there in the winter, and it generally doesn't go below 4 degrees. Average is about maybe 8 or 10. I put all my bulbs in there. That's all those boxes you see with the holes in. Those are all dahlias and cannas and callas. And the geraniums, those are the bags hanging from the line there with the clothespins. I tried the geranium in a bag trick last year and had about 60% success. So I'm not sure if I'm going to do that again this year. They're still outside right now. And then there's some different pots that I bring in of tender bulbs that I grow in pots. I don't take them out of their pot. I just put the whole pot in cold storage. Next spring, I bring the pots back out in, say, March, put them in front of the patio door inside, in front of the patio door, so they're getting as much light as possible. Give them some water, and of course, then they start growing and have a head start for the season. And I also do some cold stratifying of seeds in here because, as you know, if you're doing seeds that need to go through a period of cold, they just putting in your refrigerator for 6 to 8 weeks. Well, the temperature in here is cold enough for the cold stratification. But obviously not everyone has a cold storage room. So your other options are find your coolest dark spot in the basement, because these things do need a dormant period. So you can't just continue to grow them. And I know people have tried an insulated garage, and I hesitated to put that in here because garage temperatures can vary, the door can get left open, you know, and then you lose your plants. So you can try it. I don't recommend it. In fact, I know some people say they put their pots of tulips through a cold period in the garage, but I've tried that and I had no success. The tulip bulbs froze, and it was an insulated garage. So I was actually surprised about that because I've never had water freeze in there, but the tulips did. So, and that would be my outdoor stash of houseplants and tropicals waiting to get sprayed and brought inside, and that was a week ago. So you can see there's my eucomis, the pineapple lily plants. These go into cold storage. They get chopped back and put into cold storage, and as I said, I just pull them out the next year and they start growing again. And I believe that is it. No, I have my tips still, sorry. So if you're going to try this, some of the things I would say are to always plant in the spring if you're going to try something that's not quite hardy to your existing zone. That gives the plant more time to establish, get a good root system before it goes into the winter. Buying a smaller plant gives it a better chance. There's less stress on it, transplant shock from the start. It gets its root system established a little better. It's maybe under the snow line for that first year to help it get through. Alpine plants are a good way to start for pushing the zone limit because obviously they're used to colder climates, but the key for most alpine plants is excellent drainage. So obviously you're going to improve the drainage whenever you can. You're going to try some of these plants. You want to encourage a strong root system. So as I mentioned, getting rid of all that nursery soil and getting the roots established in your resident soil right away is a good way to go. Give them time to adjust and settle in. Don't expect a lot of growth that first year. Don't expect blooms that second year. It may take a couple years for them to get the bloom size. And placement for viewing. Some of these plants will be late in the season because you are pushing the limit and they're trying to get them to do their thing in a shorter growing season. So put them where you can see them, even if it's going to mean that, it's in late September, October viewing. And try some of the other species for some of the genera that do well. I've got a number of the different species of peony, Peonia obovata, and modii do well in my garden. I tried those after I tried Peonia maloquitzii and found out that these are also hardy. Aconitum's are generally a good one to try, and the alliums seem to have a lot of different varieties that you can push the zone limit with. And if you're willing to try, I will say that sourcing plants and seeds can be a challenge because, of course, our local nurseries have what is hardy to our area. Choose your planting location carefully. If you've got a microclimate, use it to advantage, add that drainage, and you might need some extra protection the first year. I said I don't like seeing things wrapped up and trussed up because it's just not a pretty sight for the garden. and winter is too long to be looking at ugly things. But sometimes you just need that extra protection the first year, and that can be as simple as adding mulch to the roots, piling some leaves around it, or even just shoveling some extra snow on that plant. Some plants may survive but not thrive, and a couple examples I know from my experience would be Pyrrhus japonica. I've got a Pyrrhus japonica, and I don't know the common name of that. I think it's just Pyrrhus, that I started, or I bought at I think it was at a Superstore garden center, and I think it's been in the ground 4 years, and it's still 6 inches tall. It's there every year, but it's not exactly thriving. And then I know another master gardener, Kelly Knoll, started or grew a Carya japonica, and the same story. It survived, but it only got to about 12 inches in height, had a couple small yellow blooms on it, and she said she was in shock when she saw it growing in its proper climate, where it's 4 and 5 foot tall and just covered in yellow blossoms. And remember, there will be some weather anomalies. We say climate's getting warmer, but you're going to get some of those old-fashioned, really cold winters, and you might lose some of these things. And you can try again in a different spot, or you can just give up. But I think most of us are stubborn enough and willing to give it a second shot. So thank you very much. And I know we're going to open up to questions. But before Colin starts the questions, I think probably one of the first questions might be, where do I get some of my plants? So here are some of my sources. Mail order, and the Fraser Symbol Farms, Salt Spring Island, and Phoenix Perennials out in Richmond, BC are 2 excellent mail order. And Fraser's doesn't have pictures on their catalog, so you have to have another window open on your browser to look at, Google the pictures, and you just have to be careful with both of these. Obviously, they're in a different zone limit than us, so check the zone carefully. And of course, a great way to find some interesting plants is a road trip to Southern Ontario. 2 of my favorite nurseries, and I, of course, didn't get to go anywhere this year, so I'm salivating just thinking about these places. Vineland Nursery in Vineland, Ontario, so down near St. Catharines, and Lost Horizons Nursery near Acton. Both excellent nurseries. Vineland doesn't have their website with their plant material. You have to go there and look around, but interesting and unique specimens of evergreens, Japanese maple, and at a reasonable price. Lost Horizons has the rare and unusual, and he actually has his business for sale, so I don't know how much longer it'll be around, but he has a good website with the plant description, plant list, so at least you can get an idea of what you might find there. And for seed, Reitman Alpines in St. Andrews, New Brunswick, do mail order. Plant World Seeds out of the UK, again, get some interesting and unusual things. Just check the zones before you buy things, and it's no problem having seeds sent to Canada. I've never had a problem with that, and I asked them that when I first started shipping, buying from them, and he said he's never had a problem shipping to Canada. And joining some of the different rock garden clubs. So the Ottawa Valley Rock Garden Horticultural Society, they do an annual seed exchange and a plant sale, I believe. So if you're interested in those kind of plants, join up there and you'll get some interesting things. And the North American Rock Garden Society, or NARGS, and they're online, they do a seed exchange if you're a member. So now we can go to questions.
Okay, thank you, Marianne. Quite fascinating presentation. I'm sure encourage us all to try to push the zone limits. Now we have a few questions. You talked about edible, we talked about figs. I'm just wondering about other edible fruits that you might be able to grow by pushing the limits.
Well, the pawpaw tree would be one.
Yeah.
I have a Can't think of the name of it. I'm
Okay.
picturing it. It's a nut. It's a filbert. What's the other name for filbert?
Oh, a filbert. Oh, okay. Oh, yes. I think I know what you mean.
Hazelnut? Hazelnut?
Hazelnut. Thank you. Yeah, hazelnut, which is perfectly hardy here, and that's one that people don't realize they can grow. You have to beat the squirrels to it. I'm just trying to think of what I grow in the way of fruits and things, but I know I have the same friend up the road who told me about the fig plants. He grows artichokes all the time. He tricks them into, like, they're usually a biennial, but he tricks them by starting the seed really early inside and then puts his transplants outside. And he gets a good hardy crop of artichokes. In fact, he shared some of his seedlings with me.
Okay, excellent. One other thing, you talked about a scree bed, Marianne. I'm just wondering if you'd like to just give us a bit more of an explanation what a scree bed is.
Well, scree is generally gravel and grit. And my version of it is along my front walkway, when they were putting in the interlock, where they left the big pile of sand is where I spread out. And I said, this will be my alpine bed. So it's pure, well, it's not pure. It's got mixed in with some of the topsoil, but there's a lot of the sand in there. And then I've used pea gravel as the mulch on top, which every time you weed and pull out another plant or put a new plant in, it seems to get more pea gravel mixed in with the soil. So
Right.
It's got a lot of grit mixed in it now, so it's very well draining.
Okay, all right. Now, you did also mention one thing that I'm interested. You mentioned, I think, hardware cloth, a mesh that was good for squirrels. Now, I'm in permanent war with the squirrels. I'm just wondering, could you just enlighten me on exactly what that is?
Oh, well, it's basically a wire mesh. Do you want me to run to the garage and get it for you? I could show it. No, that's just what they call it, hardware cloth, but it's really just a wire mesh. It's a square grid and it's tiny. It's about a centimeter by, maybe half a centimeter.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah, it's a small grid.
And you get that at the nursery store, at the nursery.
No, get it at a hardware store.
Hardware store. Okay,
Yeah.
I will try for that. Okay. Now, the other thing is you didn't mention anything about greenhouses. And I know in England, walled gardens were always ways where people were able to push the zone limits. Have you tried using greenhouses or walled gardens, growing up plants up against walls? I
certainly do use my southwest, like I've got a wall that gives a southwest exposure, and that's where I do most of my zone limit pushing. So definitely you get the reflected heat off of that wall. It also cuts the wind, and yeah. Okay, so good. Definitely that creates a microclimate. And a greenhouse, I don't know if it's worth the expense of heating it, to be honest.
Yeah, because that's the thing in our climate, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We've got one more question from Audrey Turner. Are there cherry trees that push the zone limits?
Well, there are hardy cherry trees, and both sweet cherries and sour cherries, because I know I got my cherry trees from Peter Knippel. And I had a Bing, a Vans, and a Stella, I think. Because the Stella was self-pollinating, the Bing and the Vans for cross-pollinating. But anything in the cherry family, the prunus family, are all prone to some pretty nasty diseases, and I lost mine.
Oh, okay.
They just all succumbed. One year I had a nice crop of cherries, and then the next year they started, well, they greened up, and then they turned brown and just died.
Oh, okay. All right. Are there any other questions? Any other questions coming in on the chat?
Yeah, I had some. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, from Marilyn. Sorry, Marilyn. Yeah. It says lots of wonderful looking plants. When pushing the zone limits, do people find the plants might grow but not bloom? Thinking of Circis canadensis in Ottawa area where they may not bloom in northern parts of Ottawa?
Okay, well, definitely, it depends on the year too, because I've had my cercis bloom in Ottawa, and but sometimes they're about to set their bloom and you get a late frost,
Yeah.
and all those blooms are damaged and then they don't open. So yeah, you can, in a good year they might bloom, in a bad year they might not. And if you're in an exposed colder area, they might not. If you're in a good little warm microclimate, they should bloom again. So it is just a trial and error thing.
Okay. All right, got another question here from Kathleen Fisher. I would like to ask more about how I might try to overwinter a purple passion flower plant, Passiflora incarnata, which grew really well in a big planter in my garden this summer. I started it from cutting from a plant that I bought the summer before. It would be great to try and leave the mother plant in the ground to come back next spring. So overwintering the purple passion flower plant.
Okay, well, I would definitely get a backup. So take your cuttings and bring inside part of it if you can.
Good.
And then if you are going to try it outside, then definitely I would put some kind of structure, enclosure, pickets with wrap around the area, and then fill it with leaves.
Okay.
And if you can use oak leaves, all the better. Oak leaves don't pack as much as maple leaves and ash leaves and those other leaves. Oak have more substance and tend to not break down as quickly. So they're like the fiberglass pink insulation. They don't pack down, and it's the layers of air in between the leaves that actually offer the insulation value as opposed to the leaves themselves. So, but go not just right around the roots. Go a couple feet out from where your plant is, maybe actually 2 or 3 feet out. So this is going to be a big pile of leaves covering the whole area.
Okay, thank you. So do we have any more questions? Okay, then well, I'm going to ask Marilyn to just wind up for us. So Marilyn, will you wind up?
I'll try here.
And thank our
Okay,
our presenter.
Okay, yes, I was just trying to sort of get the audio on.
All right, sorry.
So, Marianne, as I said in my written comment, I mean, you really showed some lovely, lovely plants, and it's a sort of an eye opener as to what people can try and experiment and maybe end up with some success and surprises that they weren't sure that they'd be able to achieve. So I think that you gave us a lot of tips and inspiration. So thank you so much. And thank you also for being willing to be our first virtual presenter, and the various trials and tribulations that seem to go along with that. But it's been a great help for us. And thank you so very much for agreeing to prepare this presentation for us.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, that was great then. So any last minutes thoughts from anybody? Again, now thanks to Marianne for that wonderful presentation. And I will now close the meeting. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can't see anybody, but I can say thank you.
Thank you
That's
very
great.
much, everybody. Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.